Good morning, everyone. This is Pastor Bryan. Today, I would like to present you the Word of God titled Samson, God's Chosen Dysfunctional Judge. After hearing the title of this week's sermon, you might wonder how it is possible for a God-chosen person to be a dysfunctional judge. And I agree with you because that's how I exactly had felt when I first encountered the stories. The English word dysfunctional means not operating normally or properly, or deviating from the norms of social behavior in a way regarded as bad. Therefore, if he or she is God chosen, one must be functional since God never made mistakes picking a rightful servant for himself. However, the judge Samson must be an exception to the case because everything he had done while he was living seems defiles the calling of God, derailed from the plans of God, and deviated from the purpose of God. He was a God-chosen judge even before he was conceived and was born. But he lived reckless life following after his own desires of flesh. Today's passage is Judges chapter 14, verse 1 through 20. Let's read entire verses together and unpack the lessons in detail. Samson went down to Timnah and saw their young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. His father and mother replied, Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, she is the right one for me. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at the time they were ruling over Israel. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swamp of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast as was customary for young men. When the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. Let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you cannot tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. He replied, out of the eater, something to eat, out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days, they could not give the answers. On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our properties? Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, You hate me, you don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. I haven't even explained it to my father or mother, he replied. So why should I explain it to you? She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the seventh day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. She in turn explained the riddle to her people. Before sunset on the seventh day, the man of the town said to him, What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home, and Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. Amen. Samson is the biblical hero, and Hercules, a man of superpower, who nonetheless could not escape tragedy. Samson, found in the book of Judges, chapter 13 through 16, is the last of the judges who rescued the Israelites from the hands of Philistine. However, he is hardly an ideal role model for us because he denied the calling of God. He broke his vow, married outside of the people of Israel twice, and functioned more as a vigilante than a leader. The details of the Samsons' birth already signify him as a mystical figure. Chapter 13 of Judges tells the story of Manoah and his barren wife. One day, an angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife, promising that she will bear a son. But this comes with a warning. She cannot be contaminating her body with any alcohol because her child will be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from birth. She also learned that her son will save the Israelite from the hands of Philistines. The Samson's destiny and his connection to the Philistines are explicitly laid out by God even before he was born. But regardless of the plans of God, it seems like Samson's life had made several turns that made him draw away from the Lord. And these Samson's dramatic life events are pictured in three very interesting but different yet similar images: a young woman, a young lion, and young men of Philistines. First, Samson killed a young lion. Samson defiled his God-given identity by doing so. Samson's story skips from his birth to his adulthood, where his first distinguishing act is to ask his father to bring him a certain Philistine woman to be his wife. But of course, his parents objected, asking him to find a woman among the Israelites. Unfortunately, the story does not reveal why Samson went down to Timnah, a Philistine city of Canaan, but there he saw a young Philistine woman and fell in love with her. So when he returned to his hometown, he said, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah, now get her for me as my wife." But of course, his father and mother, who were fully aware of God's plan, rebuked him and disapproved of his idea. But Samson wasn't an obedient son. He said to his father, "Get her for me, she is the right one for me." We can hear the strong tones of the voice of Samson that shows no respect toward his father. They failed to convince Samson to obey their instructions. Because now we see Samson and his parents together are traveling down to Timnah to see the young Philistine woman. Samson was briefly away from his parents when they almost reached the city and approached Timnah's vineyards. Then, for a reason not explained in the text, he was alone, and suddenly a young lion came roaring toward Samson. Then the Spirit of God came upon him powerfully, so that he tore the lions apart with the bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. Then he came back to his parents, but he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. The author did not explain or add any note to this part of the story, but the text has a hidden message that echoes to the ears of those who hear. Therefore, we need to read today's passage with the perspective that Samson is a chosen Nazarite who should have lived a holy life by distancing himself from any of the unclean things or the person. But what did Samson do? He killed a lion and saved himself. We cannot blame Samson killing the lion with his bare hand and eventually touch the dead body of the lion. This is not a problem because it all happened unexpectedly. And Samson had no choice but to save himself by killing the lion. The problem is that he failed to tell his parents about it. The real problem is that he had ignored to cleanse himself from the defiled condition that he fell into. According to the laws of Moses, the Israelite considered several things unclean. But a Nazarite had to follow much stricter law to keep themselves clean. The book of Numbers chapter 6 lists three main things that they must refrain from: any byproducts of the grapevines. They were banned from drinking even vinegar made out of grapes or eat raisin made out of grapes. No razor may be used on their head, no hair cuttings, nor beard trimmings. And they must not go near a dead body. He was not allowed to be near the dead body of the family members, such as parents even. If he was defiled for some reason, he must cleanse himself by carrying out a cleansing ritual. For Jews, uncleanness is like a contagious disease. When a person touches an unclean thing or person, then the person also becomes unclean. Therefore, the idea of cleaning oneself is more than keeping self-purity, but the community's holiness. Therefore, when Samson was defiled by the dead body of the young lion, he put everybody around him in danger of defilement without knowing. That is exactly what he had done to his parents, because Samson kept his silence about his defilement. Therefore, he is not only defiled himself, but also everybody around him. That is not right at all in the eyes of God. The second thing is that Samson fell in love with a young Philistine woman. Samson derailed from God-given plan by doing so. Samson and his parents entered the city and went into the house of the young woman of Philistine. They met and talked with the woman, and he liked her. The statement "he liked her" is a weak translation. It is more like he was very much satisfied. But this too is a weak translation, in my opinion. The English word "like" is a translation of the Hebrew word "yasha." And it means to be right, be straight, be level, be just, be lawful. Samson was fully satisfied in his heart because he thought everything was right. He tells the reader that he was not even concerned an inch about what he as a Nazarite did in the eyes of God. So he made his wedding vow to her and her family and returned to his hometown. His parents were there, but they also agreed with Samson by keeping their silence. At this point, we must revisit what the author hinted to us at the beginning of the story. In verse 4, he testified his parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. What the author is revealing here is that it was God's original purpose of making Samson connect with the Philistine woman is to make Samson confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. And now he wants to marry her, and he is only busy with his love business. So Samson made another travel down to Timnah to marry her sometime later. On this trip to Timnah, Samson turned aside to look at the lion's carcass for some reason. This Samson's peculiar behavior hints to us that the incident of killing the young lion during his first trip left him a pretty big impression in his heart. But please picture this: a Nazarite proactively and voluntarily getting closer to the lion's carcass. And first time he had no choice but to kill it, but this time he has full control over it, but he has no excuse. He deliberately defiled himself by getting closer to unclean thing. But when he got closer to the lion's carcass, he saw a swamp of bees and some honey in the carcass. He could have turned away from it now, but what did he do? Samson scooped out the honey with his hand and ate it as he went along. And he came back to his parents and he gave them some, and they too ate it. But again, he did not tell them what he had done. So this part of the passage reveals to us that Samson not only derailed from God-given plan, but also repeatedly defiled himself with the dead body of the lion. But the unscripted drama of Samson continues. Third, Samson deceived the young men of Philistine. Samson deviated from God-given purpose. Samson and his parents are there again at Timnah, a city of Philistine. A wedding feast was held for Samson, and 30 groomsmen joined the feast according to their custom. They were the Philistine, and probably they were the relatives and friends of his wife. At the wedding feast, Samson tells a riddle to his 30 companions, groomsmen. If they can solve it, he would give them 30 pieces of linen clothes and the 30 pieces of garment. But if they cannot, they must give Samson 30 pieces of fine linens and garments. The riddle is veiled account of 2 encounters with the lion, at which only he was present, so no one knows about it. The riddle is, out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. So Samson asked them, what is it? The Philistines are infuriated by the riddle because they had realized Samson had played them. So the 30 groomsmen decide to revenge on Samson's wife on 4th day. They came to his wife and threatened her that they would burn her and her father's household if she did not discover the answer to the riddle for them. So Samson's wife had no choice but to conspire with them to find out the answer. She cried every 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day, at her urgent and a tearful imploring, Samson gives away the answer. And she handed it over to the 30 Philistines. And of course, they won the game. Samson right away realized that Philistine 30 men had conspired with his wife and became furious. So Samson went down to the Ashkelon, one of the 5 major cities of Philistines, and he slayed 30 Philistine men and robbed their clothes. And then he gave it to them, and in anger he returned to his father's home. While Samson was still upset with his wife and away from her, the bride's father gives her to one of the groomsmen as his wife. Sometime later, Samson finally returned to Timnah and looked for his wife, unaware that she is now married to one of his friends. But her father refused to allow Samson to see her, offering to give Samson a younger sister instead. That's right, a man's good intention do not justify man's evil actions. When Samson raised his hands to kill those innocent Philistines and rob their clothes and garments, he did not fight for God. He committed murder. This never was part of God's plan. Today's passage ends here. So what do we learn from today's passage? When Samson, who was born with God's special mission, deviated from God's original purpose, he did not fight with the Philistines to rescue his people from their oppression, but out of his own rage and anger. He lifted his hands to murder those innocent Philistines because he could not conquer his own emotion of anger. One principle for us to remember is this: when you fail to follow God's plan by following your desires of flesh, then its consequences will bring suffering to your loved ones, and your joy will drift away. But there is still one bright side to all the accounts of the story, that God still had carried out his promise to rescue his people from the hands of the enemy. So I pray and bless you that you and I will always seek the approval of God by offering simple obedience to the Lord whenever he speaks to us. You and I, we are not called to be a Nazarite, but we are children of God. And this new identity given by God is our calling. So we need to strive to live according to this new identity that brings glories to him in everything we do. God bless you.